we all have to constantly be disruptors in our own industries.
Good morning, everyone, from our beautiful Boston, Mass headquarters, and welcome to another conversation with short, insightful discussions with CX visionaries to help us all keep up with the ever evolving consumer. It's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Jeannie Walters, the CEO and Chief Customer Experience Investigator of the Experience Investigators. This is a group dedicated to creating fewer ruined days for customers. And Jeannie's expertise has been deployed at brands like Verizon, Siemens, Allstate, and many others. She's a founding member of the CXPA, a LinkedIn learning instructor, and a certified customer experience professional, naturally, with a passion for improving everyday interactions. A perfect fit for a conversation with, if you ask me. My pleasure to have Jeannie talk through how to deliver on your CX mission every time. Jeannie, good morning. Great to have you here.
Good morning, Terrence. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I've heard nothing but nice things, so it's nice to put a face to the name finally.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jeannie, how's your last 14 months been? How have you been learning, staying engaged through this new normal?
Yeah, I think like most people, I started pretty much looking around thinking, what's every day going to be like?
Mm,
And since then, I feel like we have some decent routines. And I've always been the type of person who consumes a lot of information. I love learning. So, yeah, I'm way into podcasts right now. I am constantly kind of looking for what's what's innovative. And so I really try
mm.
to look for what are some of the things that we've learned about people, and even, to the point of digging into some academic papers and things like that. So, I'm okay. Like, we feel so fortunate because we know a lot of people have been suffering, and
Yeah,
I have 2 kids in remote school and the whole thing, and, managing all of that. I Every day I feel very, very fortunate that we have the capacity to have great Wi-Fi and things like that,
yeah,
continue to serve our clients, to, you know, just carry on.
yeah. It's funny you say that because I imagine having two children because I have one new child, a
Mm,
daughter, that we can
congratulations.
hardly keep up with. So to double it, I don't know. More power to you.
Well, they're both teenagers now. One's in 8th grade, one's a junior in high school, and so they are, more independent than little kids, which is helpful.
Yeah,
But it's been, we kind of look at it as it's been an opportunity too. Like, they've never really seen me work, and now
yeah,
they see how hard I work, and
right.
they're kind of like, "Whoa." And I think we all have a better understanding of how we operate better as a family.
Yeah, and I can relate to that too because usually I just went away and came home, but now my wife and my
Mhm.
daughter probably doesn't perceive it yet. She sees why I'm so tired. You know.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right. We're all making it. We're all
yeah.
figuring it out.
Jeannie, put yourself in the shoes of a consumer because we saw so much change in the past 14 months. Have you had any particularly memorable experiences?
Mhm. Yeah, like most people who went through this, I decided that I needed to join the cult of Peloton.
Ah,
And we actually had kind of a bumpy start because everything was delayed and everything
yep.
else. But because of the delay, they said until the bike arrives, you can have access to the app and really explore their classes.
Mm,
And I've been very impressed with their digital side of the business and how they have personalized it. There's a lot of gamification, of course, but
right.
I really have found that introduction before the bike even arrived actually helped me feel more connected to the brand by the
Mm.
time the actual equipment arrived. So that really stood out to me, and I'm all in now on that thing.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I mean, you got to give them a tremendous compliment for the way that they are able to build a community. And I
Mhm.
laugh and joke frequently that the thing about Peloton is very similar to something like CrossFit, right? You usually
Yep.
know if someone has a bike,
Yeah, that's
even if
right.
they don't
That's
tell
right.
you.
I'm guilty right now. I'm guilty of that joke. How
Yeah,
do you know if they have it? Because they tell you.
right. Yeah. And so, I mean, more power to them. That's a great way. Word of mouth is that authenticity that will drive big impact.
Mhm, mhm, for sure.
Um, So let's jump right into it, Jeannie. Tell me a bit about your mission, as I mentioned in the beginning of the segment, to create fewer ruined days for customers.
Mhm.
Naturally, this sounds like something just about everyone would be on board with. But where did this actually come from? What sparked this for you and made you realize that this was something you should be focusing on?
Yeah, I was trying to think of how this spark happened, and I can't even recall how. I think part of it is that when we talk about customer experience, a lot of times people talk about the big, huge things, right? The
Mm,
wow moments, and we've got
mm,
to wow everybody every time, and all these huge ideas and goals. And yet, a lot of what happens and a lot of what customers tell us is that it's not really the big things all the time. It's these smaller moments
mm,
that kind of add up. And if you have a part in a customer's journey where you don't deliver, maybe you're late, maybe you're grumpy, maybe they get, service that is lower than the service that they expected,
right.
what happens is they walk away with kind of that negative feeling,
Mm,
even if they might not say, I'm never shopping here again or anything that traumatic, they're still chipping away at the relationship. And so when
right.
I think about ruining somebody's day, I think about all those stories that we tell each other.
Mm,
I used to joke when I got on a plane and said what I did, I had to be prepared for my seatmate to tell me the worst customer service story that they've ever experienced
yeah,
because
good
that's
learnings for you, right?
yeah, exact they just go straight there, right?
Right.
And, uh, and a lot of those stories people carry around for like decades, right?
Mm,
Like they will tell you about the day that they had to wait in line for 4 hours or the day that they had to, be transferred on a customer service call or the day that they didn't get their Peloton the day that they wanted it, all of those
right.
things. Those kind of things really do add up. And I think for business people in general, we have not been trained to think about emotional impact. We
Mm,
just haven't. And so now we're realizing the power of understanding emotions, of understanding how to really deliver experiences that can elevate emotions. And so the flip side of that is what can we do to just remove those negative experiences? What can we do to make sure we're not neglecting those moments? Because, they're not going to necessarily, again, cause somebody to leave,
mm,
but this is all about trust. Every relationship we have is about trust. And the same is true with customers and brands. And so if we ruin their day one time, that chips away at that trust that they have with our brand. So that's why I'm so passionate about it because I think we can and if we all do this, I always sound a little idealistic when I say this, but if we all do this in customer experience, we are making the world a better place because then people aren't carrying around that negativity to their next experience,
right.
whether that's coming home or going to the coffee shop or going to work or whatever. We need to really focus on the fact that when we are interacting with people, it is a human interaction and there are real consequences to that. And part of
Mm.
that is whether we ruin their day or whether we give them a little bit of delight, a little elevated emotion that they can carry on throughout their day and their journey.
Right, and then keep them from telling you about it on their next flight.
Oh,
Um,
I welcome it. And if not, I just say I'm in insurance or something.
yeah. Um, no, but I think obviously incredibly important, right? Because we saw even over the last 14 months that loyalty was thrown out the window.
Yep.
So you can't afford
Yep.
to let maybe the chips that you're chipping away at your customer and their experience are a bit larger than they've ever been, right? When you
It's a
have negative
great
experience.
point. It is. It's a great point because we needed each other during this time,
Right.
and none of us could do this alone. And so I think the fact that customers started seeing things like supply chain disruption and understanding how that impacted them,
Mm,
but they were also willing to understand more with more visibility. So if you were authentic and said, this is actually what's happening, this is why, people are more likely to understand that as long as you've built up that trust from the beginning. And
right.
that's why these positive moments are so important. But I think, these things that happen, these innovations in customer experience in the last 14 months were amazing in many ways, not only because of the brands that invested in those, But you think about the education that happened, like, seniors were the biggest group to adopt digital experiences.
Mm,
And part of that was because they had to, but brands really invested in helping them understand how to get what they needed. So you can't go to the grocery store. So what do? Well, we're going to offer you digital ordering and pickup.
yep.
And now all this whole group was able to adopt and adapt to it. And for years these brands were like, "Oh, let's not invest in that. Don't worry about that group
Mm,
because they like to go to the grocery store. That's their thing."
yeah.
And we make all these assumptions about people, and we need to really look at that as how can we make sure that we're getting people what they need in the way that they want it, in a way that is emotionally charged in a positive way.
Right.
And I was just amazed. I mean, there were digital transformations that on paper they were told brands said, "Oh, it's gonna take 5 plus years." And they literally turned that plan into a 6-week execution and
Mm,
delivered on it. And that's because their customers needed them. And that those types of stories, that's what gets me really jazzed about customer experience. The work we do, it is that important. And I think we can't ever forget that.
no, very, very good point. And I think to your first set of feedback, focusing on the details is extremely important. But if I'm on the brand and retailer side, it feels like it would be a tremendous consumption of my time and resources. How do you usually suggest brand and
Mhm.
retailers navigate this sort of beginning entry point to making sure that your customers have fewer ruined days?
Yeah. Well, it really does all come back to who are you trying to be? What is the promise that you've made to your customers? And so that's really about your vision and values
Mm,
and your what I call a customer experience mission, which is about what is the experience that you promise that you are delivering for your customers. It's not about the products, it's not about what you're actually selling, it's about what your customers are doing with those products and services. And so if you can stay focused on that and create kind of an engagement throughout your organization with that, what happens is these engaged employees start feeling empowered to make real change and they keep their radar up, right? Like we've
yeah.
seen things where even the way we send invoices out, if we send those out in a certain way that is basically punitive, I mean, literally, we list all the horrible things that will happen if somebody doesn't pay this invoice,
Yeah.
even though we just spent all this time wooing them in the sales phase, right? We're
Mm,
like, "Come with us, we're friends," and then we're like, "Don't forget."
yeah.
And so by creating this awareness that, you know what, this is a relationship and these are the promises that we've made and we want you to live up to these promises as an employee, then your employees will start seeing things like that and saying, let's work on this. Let's figure out a better way to say this. Let's figure out a way to enter into this positively.
Mm,
And they will start bringing those things to you. And I think the other side of this is it's not just about I mean, things are going to go wrong, right? And if you have any sort of retail space or restaurant or anything, people will tell you, one of the things that we have to remember is that people are going to complain about wobbly carts. People are going to
right,
complain about dirty bathrooms, right?
right.
These will happen. So instead of spending all of your energy trying to fix those like individual things, this is more about creating an awareness so that people within your organization proactively think, wow, I'm going to go in there and make sure that the bathroom is clean on my
Mm,
own. I'm going to make sure that we pull this wobbly cart out so it doesn't bother customers. And that's the balance that we're always trying to get is how can we improve and increase the number of positive moments and how can we just remove consistently those negative things that are often just neglected? We
right.
just don't think about them. And so that's the power of this, I think. It's not about getting mired in the details of, trying to make sure every bathroom is clean every moment of the day.
Mm.
It's about this higher awareness of what we're doing and how we can deliver for our customers
And proactively too, like you mentioned, in front
proactively.
of it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Exactly.
Jeannie, you talk about how brands aren't judged on how well they deliver on promises on a daily basis, but instead, customers will simply walk away if they aren't happy, right?
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
do you see as the solution to having more of a measurable change towards a better overall customer experience for this?
Yeah, I think our industry about 10 years ago went through this huge focus on data. And we were like, we can get all this amazing data. We have things like Net Promoter Score and customer satisfaction and customer effort score and all these metrics now. And it was kind of the dawn of let's just ask our customers and we'll get all this data.
Yeah,
And what tends to happen is we put the cart before the horse and we say, let's do these surveys, let's find out. We don't create them in an actionable way. We don't create them in a way that has a system behind it. So when we get that information, when we receive that wonderful feedback, we don't know what to do with it. And there are plenty of organizations out there, big organizations, that survey the heck out of their customers, right? But they still
mm,
don't do much with it. They report those numbers inside their organization, but they don't zero in on what's actually going on here. And I
yeah,
think if we look at it as this cycle and really understand that it's about those insights, then that again empowers everybody to say, you know what, I noticed that this number is steadily going down, maybe not very dramatically,
mm,
right? But steadily going down. Let's look into that. Let's figure out what's going on there. And that's where you get those insights that then you can turn into action. And then you go through that cycle again and find out, did our fixes work? Did our innovations do what we thought they were going to do? But it requires a real humility and open mindedness. And that's hard because once you invest in processes and people and technology as an
mm,
organization, you want that to pay off in the way that you predict. And when customers are saying, I don't know, it's okay, it's really easy to just think, let's just keep going. They're happy enough. And what happens then is that a competitor pops up and says, we made this 10% better. We removed some of the obstacles and friction. And then the customers just start seeing that and moving over to your competition. And so, especially in today's world, there is a disruptor around the corner. I promise.
right.
There's a disruptor in your industry around the corner. And a lot of the original disruptors, they got pretty complacent, right? Like they decided that they did their thing once. We all have to constantly be disruptors in our own industries. We have to constantly look at what is the experience, what is the feedback we're getting, and how can we make sure that we are going to continue to deliver for our customers. So I think with all that data that we get, we have to make sure that we have a strategy first, a CX strategy, a feedback strategy, so we're not over or under surveying too, and then figure out like how do we make this actionable before we go out and collect all this information in a lot of cases. Sometimes we collect information first, but we need to know what we're going to do with it.
I love that comment to always be focused on being the disruptor, right? Because yes, you're right. Someone is right around the bend to do it
Yep.
to you if you're not.
Yep.
Very good point. Now, we had Dennis Snow on, I think about a month ago, who spent years at Disney. So he
Hmm.
talked to us a little bit about what I'm going to ask you as your next question. Do you believe that CX always goes back to a company's mission and value? So it was obviously very interesting to hear Dennis's thoughts there, coming from
Hmm.
the Disney world. But Jeannie, in short, what is the importance of establishing a strong ideology from the start, and
Hmm.
what does this mean to you?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this. I mean, I think that is what motivates everybody, really, is the why.
Yeah,
And part of what having a strong mission, vision, values, what that's all about is making sure that the people who want to work with you are aligned with those from the beginning. And so, one of the ways that we talk to clients sometimes is say, can we meet with your HR team? Can we talk about job descriptions? Can we talk about how people are hired and the candidate experience?
mm,
Because you want to make sure that from the beginning, everybody understands this is super important and they want to, you want people who see that mission and think, yes, I'm on board. This reflects me as well. And once you have that, everything else gets easier because every single day we ask employees to make judgment calls. We say, here's all the process, here are, 18 binders, and we
yeah,
train them over and over and over. But every day we're basically saying, do what you think within these parameters. But what happens is we're humans and so are our customers. And guess what? Humans are impossible to predict. We
Mm,
make no sense. We are totally irrational. We are nuanced. And so there are lots of things that fall in between the lines on those process documents. And by having a strong mission, when people are faced with those things of a judgment call, really deciding, what do I do here? They have that North Star. They get to think to themselves, how will this help live our mission? How will this, make sure that we are delivering for our customers?
right.
And if they're empowered to do that, customers feel that. That's the magic of Disney, right? Like when we go to the Disney parks, everybody there is aligned with that.
Hmm.
And I think that, there are great examples out there of the strong brands that we know that really do hire based on their starting with their vision and values first, making sure they have a strong promise for the customer or a customer experience mission, and aligning every single thing inside the organization with that outcome. And I think that's where there's just tons of power in this. And with customer experience specifically, I'll say, two things happen in business. One is we start with the tactics. So somebody reads a book or hears something and they go, "Oh, you know what we need? We need a customer journey map. That's what we need."
Mm,
So we start with the tool, um, or we treat it like either it's common sense, like everybody just knows that, and we should just focus on that, or we just don't think about it at all. And if you look at traditional business plans, they basically flip from focused on the customer in the beginning to getting once the customer gets in the door, the business plan flips to operations. So it's like the customer doesn't exist after that. We have to constantly flip the script as customer experience leaders. And we have to constantly come back to that mission and vision and values because that's what really will guide all of the decisions that we make.
No, and I wanted to get back to something you mentioned earlier too, Jeannie, about the customer experience feedback, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel today that customers feel their feedback is being overlooked, or do you feel that their needs are being considered by brands, especially now in this digital age when
Mhm.
loyalty, as I mentioned before, is thrown out the window? What is your kind of scorecard on
Mhm.
how well this is being taken advantage of?
Well, I think there are some exciting things happening, especially around real time feedback and how customers are empowered to basically share feedback in their own way. Because I do think that we all, as customers, got a lot of surveys and never heard back from brands, right?
Yeah.
We didn't know where it was going. It felt like it was a black hole. And I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who when I was asked over and over and over to fill out surveys, there was one that I basically kept saying the same thing. And then finally I said, "Well, nobody's going to read this, so blah 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 blah," and didn't get a response. And
Mm,
so that was really typical. So there's some, I think, fatigue around that that's real. But at the same time, customers who have something to tell you, they will welcome those moments where they are asked for that feedback. But I think what's happening now with digital and with mobile, you know, we are able to share more as customers with photos and videos and
right.
audio and all of these pieces of media that are more expressive. I mean, we've all been in those meetings where people are looking at dashboards of numbers and not really connecting with what they mean. They're saying, "Oh, that number goes up, that number goes down." And then you share a customer recording from the contact center, or you share a customer story about one customer, and suddenly all the leaders sit up and pay attention because that's how we relate to each other.
Hmm.
So I think when we're looking at feedback, again, we have to think about the strategy of it. And certain metrics are better for measuring certain things at different parts of the journey. So understanding how do you use customer satisfaction versus NPS? How do you invite customers into this process? Where do you dig deeper? Where do you go back and, ask for more information?
Right.
Making sure you have an idea of that before you go into it is so important. And I mean, we don't do that. People get very excited about the shiny tools, and there are some amazing tools out there, and I think it's just a matter of really looking at what are we trying to do with all this and how can we serve our customers? And then actually sharing that information with our customers. Let's
Mm,
get transparent about that. And instead of just saying, your feedback is valuable to us, go into a little bit more. Share with them the things that you've changed because of customer feedback. They want to know those things.
Right, and I think what you said that I think is especially powerful is essentially moving from just data and numbers to finding and identifying the emotion from the
Hmm.
experience, right? To make it
Hmm.
more than just the numbers. I think that's right on the money. Absolutely.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's what we didn't have when we got very excited about the data.
Yeah.
And now we're figuring out this is a layered approach. I always think about it as like a Venn diagram, right? Like there are things that overlap in the middle
Mm,
that tell the whole story, and you need each piece. You need the data and the metrics, you need customer feedback, you need innovation, and just like far out thinking for future state. You need all of those things to come together. And part of that is the emotional side, the storytelling side, because otherwise, it just gets way too easy. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen this too, where, I mean, employers get really excited, leaders get really excited because they went up point 0.5, of a percentage point
mm, right.
and they pat each other on the back, but they have no idea why it happened and they don't know how to replicate it or bring that into the rest of the journey.
Mhm.
And if we tell a story, suddenly we can see, oh, you know what happened was this employee really stepped up in a way and connected emotionally. Well, how can we replicate that? How can we make that a best practice? How can we train other employees? Then that starts bringing things to scale, which is really exciting too.
So, Jeannie, we're almost done here. I'm almost done bothering you, I promise.
No, this is great.
Let's go back in time to before the pandemic really kind of kicked off and closed everything down. So we'll say
Mhm.
last February or
Mhm.
January. Um, Talk to me about the value in preparing for the unexpected situations like this pandemic. How do you justify allocating resources to prepare for a crisis like this when it might, of course, have high costs associated with it?
Mhm.
I mean, of course, we saw the value in naturally being prepared digitally for the pandemic and everything that happened. But really, how do you kind of justify the potential high costs preparing for something else that might be around the corner?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, crisis planning is always one of those things that sounds like a really good idea, and very few organizations actually dedicate resources to it,
Yeah.
which was very apparent, wasn't it, when this all happened?
Mm,
And I think the way I think about that is, again, what's our promise? What's our mission? Start there and think about what would happen if, these certain things happened. How could we continue to live up to that promise? How could we continue to live up to that mission? And sometimes what that means is about communication. Like, can you be ready to communicate with your customers in a way that they trust you? Because when you have these moments where everything is disrupted or there's a crisis, they want to trust you. But if you don't have that relationship, then it becomes ugly quickly, right?
yeah.
And that's when they start calling and that's when they start asking, where is this stuff? That's when you see like the run on the banks. I mean, that's really
Right.
what happens. So when you're thinking about kind of these abstract crises of the future, that's where I would start is where's the mission, where's the vision, and what promise? And then how will we communicate? Because we can't predict everything. We can't predict what's going to happen with supply chain or,
Mhm.
who could have predicted that big boat in the canal,
Yeah.
right? Like all of these things
I'm
that
already forgetting its name. I can't believe I'm forgetting
right.
its name.
I know, me too. But that was, something that happened and people had to deal with it and supply chains were disrupted. So communication and continuing to think about how do we proactively build that trust with our customers
Mhm.
that will serve you long term. And I think that's something that when we look at the return on investment of that, look at the loss that happened with the pandemic, look at how many organizations couldn't find their footing for several weeks or months in some cases.
Right.
So the cost of that, I'm sure outweighs the return on the investment that they would have gotten. And so really thinking
Mhm.
about that too. But I think communication is often overlooked as part of the tools in our toolkit. And every single customer journey map, every single customer experience project I've worked on, when we look at the research of what's going right and what's going wrong, there's always something around communication. There's always something around customers maybe feeling like they're not hearing enough, or that they're hearing corporate speak and they're not really getting the real truth. Customers want visibility, especially now the younger generations. Generation Z is demanding it, and they are sniffing out things that are inauthentic, and they are not afraid to talk about that. And so I would encourage everybody to get real and get comfortable being real.
Jeannie, a lot of great sound bites there. I was scared to interrupt you. Uh, Thank you. So, Jeannie, the last question I have for you is I'm gonna have you spin around and get the crystal ball behind your desk.
Yes,
Uh,
sure.
Talk to me about the rest of 2021. What are you keeping your eye on? What are you recommending brands and
Mhm.
retailers consider as we look forward?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting ways this will play out. We are going to live in a hybrid world for a while. And part of that is because we have to not only predict and design what are these experiences going to be like with different protocols, right? Like people will still maybe have to wear masks. They will still have to be socially distanced.
Hmm,
They might be reliant now and liking all of the digital channels that we've offered. So, the people who never used to order their groceries online are now doing that very comfortably and realizing that it gives them time. So we have to prepare that some things won't change. And in fact, I just read that the majority of patients like virtual waiting rooms. They like being in their cars and waiting for that text to go in to see the doctor because they don't sit around a waiting room with sick people. So, what does that mean for the future? Well, think about the real estate. Can you get rid of a waiting room and have a bigger parking lot? So, all of these different things we have to really look at what change that customers are telling us they actually really like and prefer,
hmm,
and what will they go back to that we have to redesign and rethink. And so I'm a huge fan of service blueprinting because it's such a powerful tool where you think about what's the journey that we want to deliver, and then what are the processes and employee practices and systems that have to support that. We need to think about how can we kind of iterate around the next normal and then the next one and then the next one, and that's not only about how we design the experience, but we're also going to be dealing with customers who have different comfort levels, who have different anxiety levels.
right.
There was a report that basically said every single person, with the exception of 1% who of the population who I think they're sociopaths.
Hmm,
But, everybody else is experiencing some level of social anxiety about going back
right.
because we don't know the rules. When you go back to your workplace, how do you greet your coworker? When you go to, fly on a plane for the first time, how is that going to feel? So there are all these questions that we still don't have answers. So I really believe that in the next couple months, we're going to see innovation around this from those brands who are really thinking through these hard questions. I think we're going to see some really interesting hybrid models, for instance, in retail,
Hmm,
leveraging things like, touchless pay and leveraging augmented reality and things like that. So, really, there's going to be a boom of innovation. And part of that will be because we have to pay attention to our customers' emotions
right.
and their comfort level. And that's going to be different based on kind of every single customer you have. Everybody's going to be a little different there, so we have to offer choice
Hmm.
to help them.
Um, so funny. You said anxiety and flying, and I immediately thought, because I haven't flown yet, but I immediately grew some anxiety inside me at the thought of me being likely plopped right into a middle seat.
Right?
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
I haven't experienced it yet, but it's definitely around the corner. I've got something with middle seats. They've got an attraction to me. Wow.
Well, I think everybody is going to kind of enter at their own pace,
Yep.
and yet there will be some who don't have that choice or luxury.
Right.
And so, all of the changes that are happening, Google just announced that their famous buffet is going away for their employees. So they're offering boxed lunches.
Hmm.
Well, will some people not enjoy that? There's an environmental impact to that, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to have to figure all this stuff out. So I think that's the type of question that we have to start really looking at is what are the steps of everybody's journey, either employee or customer, and how will we help them and reassure them to feel safe and comfortable?
Excellent. Jeannie, thank you so much for the time. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here. Again, Jeannie Walters, CEO and Chief Customer Experience Investigator at the Experience Investigators, to tackle how to deliver on your CX mission every time and ensure you're giving your consumers less ruined days. Jeannie, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. This was great. Fun to be here.
Take care.